Hi, I'm Jason Silver, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and I'm joined by Jason Silver today. He is the author of Your Grass is Greener, and he's a multi-time founder of kids and a multi-time founder of companies. He gets his biggest thrill helping modern employees and their teams unlock a better way to work. We touch on that during our conversation today. But surfing, it's a close second. We do not touch on surfing during our conversation today. When he's not busy helping people solve their hardest workplace challenges, Jason's kids are busy reminding him just how much of a work in progress he still is as well. Aren't we all? Jason and I have a great conversation. We talk about the idea of finding happiness in your work, decision making. We talk about clarity. We even dive into a little bit of Rick Rubin. So let's get to it. Here is my conversation with Jason Silver. Enjoy. Jason, thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. It's funny. Sometimes I'll share behind the scenes stuff as we get started. The way you said my name is not unlike how many people say my name, right? Like it is a weird, like Mike Vardy, Mark Vardy can come out. Like I know we cut that part out, and that's fine. But it's interesting that when something happens repeatedly, you eventually just don't. It's just kind of okay, no worries, let's move on, right? That kind of thing. And I think. Sure. And I think it's interesting as I was going through your book, which is Your Grass is Greener, which I have the galley version here on my Kindle right now. Thanks so much for Idea Press for supplying that. There are so many more things that you should maybe concern yourself with, and we talked about that thank you, by the way, for letting me vent pre podcast interview, where there's so many other things that you need to kind of concern yourself with. And what I loved about the way you framed this book, and I want to get into that right out of the gate, is the 3-part process. Now, breaking books into parts is not new, but the way I'm curious, as you were putting the book together, talking about these 3 elements, these three parts, which one kind of was first explain them, and then which one was the toughest one for you to kind of really ensure that the reader gets, so that they can make sure that they leverage the other ones, and so there's nothing really falls through the cracks.
Yeah, so the book is really all about how to enjoy the job that you have more with the skills that you have, and as a result do better at it, right? And it's based on this concept that as a type A, someone who was working a ton previously, really thinking about achievement, I wouldn't have thought about it in this way before. For me, enjoyment was kind of fluff. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to accomplish some stuff, and that's when I'm going to get to enjoy it. And what I've learned over time is actually enjoyment is the fuel of the achievement. There's a lot of research out there that shows the more you enjoy what you're doing, the better you do at it. The better you do, the more you enjoy. The more you enjoy, the better you do. It's an awesome flywheel. And so the question was, I've got all these ideas about how to help people enjoy their job. How are we going to structure it? And that comes down to the parts that you asked about. And there are 3. The first part is all about how to do 5 days of work in 4 without working until midnight every single night. The second is all about how to enjoy your job more without changing your job. And the third and final is how to progress faster without waiting for a promotion. And it was structured this way very, very intentionally. A lot of conventional wisdom tells you that if you're trying to enjoy or find your purpose, which the book is not about, but enjoy is something I spend a lot of time talking about, you got to start with yourself and a lot of self-assessment. And I believe that this is very, very important, but it's misplaced. The problem with a lot of folks today, myself included, we're all very, very busy. Self-reflection is not off the side of your desk kind of a job. Right. You have to create the space for it.
Yeah.
And that's why the first section is there. How do you do 5 days of work in 4 without working until midnight every night? So you can create the space that you need to then invest in, I got to do a little bit of self-reflection here, change the way that I'm working, and so on and so forth from there. But in the absence of that, you try to do it off the side of your desk and you don't get the results that you want because it's not a part-time job to figure out what you want to be working on, how you want to be working on it, where you want to go, et cetera.
Really quickly, when did you recognize that the importance of space was necessary just as much as, because in that first part you talk about how to take control of your time. Space is something that we don't often take into account, much like you're talking about the off the desk stuff when it comes to reflection. And I mean, I'm wondering, when did you kind of recognize, oh, space is playing a role here too, not
Hmm.
just the 5 days and four, but the space that I need.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd like to tell you that there was some like beautiful aha moment. I think the thing that really struck me in reflection as I was working through writing the book is a bit of a backstory to the book. I went through a period of like, I guess we could call like extreme experimentation where I was looking for a better way. I went Tim Ferriss only on my professional life, not my outside of work life.
Mm-hmm.
So all these things, I got to change this, I got to change that. Let's try to set more goals, less goals, this productivity hack, this, whatever, on and on and on and on and on. And what I assumed was that more was better, right? If I'm able to do more things, if I add in more techniques, if I can get more into my job and still handle it all, it will be better. What I learned because I kept a tracker of all the different experiments I was running is I started to see what was helping me. And I looked back and I saw that the things that are actually having the biggest impact are the ones that are removing impediments,
Right.
right? Creating space, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the exact moment it happened, but that was kind of the aha moment I had of like, this has to be the first section of the book. You have to create the space first. You can't be running around like a chicken with your head cut off and working through existential questions at the same time, or trying to figure out whether it's your job that is truly the challenge, meaning you're in the wrong job, you're in the wrong environment, which is what most of us tend to assume, or is it me? Is there something that I'm doing that I can change that's going to have a really big impact on my role in my job? Very hard to get that kind of perspective when you're working until midnight every single night. You got a million deliverables firing off 200,000 emails. It's just hard to catch that insight. So the first third of the book, I put it there like if you just pick up the book and you read 3 chapters and it's just the first 3, I want you to walk away with 3 tangible tactical tactics that will fundamentally remove a full day of work every single week without reducing the impact that you're able to have.
Yeah, and we are going to circle back to the which one, kind of was the, for lack of a better term, toughest nut to crack. But I do want to circle back to the idea of reflection. And as you're talking about this, I mean, I'm a journaler. I think about journaling. It's one of the things I talk about. And I'm always trying to figure out a way for people who are very quantitative in their metrics, like you said, tracking, how to get them to recognize the value of journaling as a form of reflection. And I think, did you find that tracking was, that quantitative tracking was like the way to, and again, the section for we're talking about is unblock, was led to that, kind of, and you said there was no specific aha moment, but it's, to me, the tracking of the data led to oh, this is what I'm seeing. I now have not anecdotal evidence, but empirical, like data proof that this is. Did that lead to reflection, like that's more qualitative? Like, did you keep that up? Have you kept that up since then?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of a good one there when we can contrast the two.
Sure.
Okay. So 2 things I tried, cold plunges and meditating. Okay. These are very hard to quantitatively track. It's hard for me to tell you, the benefits of cold plunging. Again, I'm like an armchair neuroscientist, so we shouldn't take my word exactly for it. But the theory behind it is cold plunge, dopamine spike, you feel better, you do better throughout the day. Meditation, whack load of benefits, depending on exactly what it is going on. But I'm not measuring the dopamine in my brain after a cold plunge. Right. And so what I did is I came up with a relatively simple quantitative tracker. And the purpose of the quantitative tracker was not to make the decision about whether I'm going to stick with the habit. It was to force me to think about it in a more structured manner.
Right.
And so what I would learn, for example, is I'd be tracking cold plunges over time. And man, I'm feeling great. And after a certain amount of time, I started feeling less and less great. Like, what's going on here? I have young kids at the time. For anyone out there that has young kids, you don't get a lot of time to yourself. There was like the time I have to shower. So I replaced a 6-minute shower in the morning, which was like oddly like my time to just no one could bug me. I'm in the shower with a 6-minute cold plunge, which is brutally terrible to do, but it's supposed to make you feel great. And it does. But then I realized I'm dreading taking a cold plunge. I'm dreading that time every day. Overall, that dread is just like I'm anticipating the dread and then I'm warming myself up after the dread. why am I doing this? And despite the fact that it felt good afterwards, I felt accomplished that I was able to do it, it wasn't serving my life overall.
Right.
And so just the fact that I had this tracker, it was a place where it was being written down, and I reviewed it, every 2 weeks or every month. And just, are these things serving me? Yes or no? And then I made an intentional choice coming out of that. But that's an example of one where the local benefit was there. The data said keep doing it. All of the research says I should do this, but the global benefit wasn't. It wasn't serving my life overall. It wasn't better. So it's not a knock on cold plunges. Plenty of people love it. I'll probably do it again one day because of, when it fits into my life and a little bit better. It's just not right for me right now. And that helped me figure out my system and what works for me and, versus what doesn't. Again, not deciding just because of the data, but having it there as a forcing function. It's very lightweight. It was a very quick thing I filled out once in the morning, once in the afternoon, like a Google form that just I sent it to myself through a calendar invite, 15 seconds to fill it out, 15 minutes to review it once a month.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be heavy. Like, I think that's the other thing too, is people get caught up in the tools. They get caught up in okay, I'm going to build this really. I mean, you don't have to go crazy with it. Interestingly, I don't do cold plunges. I've done them. The version of me now is just when I'm a night owl, so I get up in the morning and we have like one of those rain showers yeah. So all I do is I dunk my head under it. Like I run the cold water over the back of my neck and that, which kind of creates a similar, it's not to the same degree, but
you don't need a lot.
No.
They say 11 minutes a week. So, if your head's underwater for a minute, in a cold shower, like it can do the job if you do it enough times. So yeah, it's a shock to the system. That's for sure.
Yeah. And there's no one right way to do it for every single person. And speaking of persons, we get to the second part, which is I definitely want to dive into, because the first thing I saw was in chapter 4. It's not a syndrome, how to promote the imposter in you. And I was like, whoa, hold on. So when we think about imposter syndrome, which we all deal with, and ultimately what happens is, as we kind of go through life, it shows up for everybody, right? Like imposter syndrome doesn't really go away. And so we're told, like, eliminate it, so on and so forth. When I saw that, I'm like, okay, how to promote it? What do you mean by promoting the imposter syndrome in you as part of the second phase, which is the unlocking after you've done the unblocking?
Yeah, so this is another example of one where removing something is very, very helpful. I think that imposter syndrome is terribly branded. And I can make like an empirical argument, or we can have more of like a broad philosophical discussion. But by definition, okay, it's something like 80% of people feel imposter syndrome. How can it be true that the vast majority of people don't belong? It's it's an oxymoron. It's a paradox, right? And so actually, if you think about it, you spend time doing the research, whatever, it turns out like imposter syndrome is synonymous with human nature, right? If you're not like a complete sociopath or incredibly self-absorbed, you're going to feel self-doubt at some point. And imposter syndrome is a very specific kind of self-doubt. It's the kind of self-doubt that says, I'm Mike and I'm working on a podcast and I don't belong with other podcasters. I am a software developer and this team is too smart for me. It's the feeling that you don't belong with your peers or the people that you're around. Okay, how can 80% of people be an imposter in that situation? It just feels like it's kind of broken to me. And what I've found is the conventional wisdom out there, and it turns out my book was kind of an attack on a lot of conventional wisdom. I don't think it's really all that helpful. It's just like believe in yourself, right? Trust in yourself, you can do anything. That has never worked for me one time in my life. I feel imposter syndrome is like, it's okay, Jay, just like ignore it. It'll be fine. Like you try to ignore it, you can't ignore it. It festers, it gets worse and blah, 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 blah. Everyone's telling you to turn off imposter syndrome, overcome imposter syndrome. You have a little bit of self-doubt, it gets labeled as a syndrome, and now you have two problems, right? You have a bit of self-doubt and you have a syndrome that you have to overcome, which I don't like.
Right. It's a label, right? It's a label. And labeling, we love labels, humans love labels, but it's misplaced.
Big time. And so when I knew I wanted to tackle imposter syndrome. I knew that there was so much literature and there's so much rhetoric around it. I didn't want to say what everybody else was saying. I had a lot of experience working with people and myself on their imposter syndrome. What I learned kind of through me just doing this experientially was, why are we trying to turn this thing off? It can be very useful. And it turns out that when you look at the research says exactly the same thing, right? A bunch of great groups did some research coming out of MIT and Harvard. Most notable one, which I talked about in the book, is they took two groups of doctors. Okay, and let's call them the imposter group and the confident group, right? So they split them later after doing like some kind of a psychological survey with them of like, does this person feel feelings of self-doubt or not belonging, imposter syndrome, and versus the self-confidence folks. Okay, and they run them through a bunch of like mock appointments. And at the end of the mock appointments, the quote unquote patients grade them, the doctors. Okay, and what they found is that the imposter doctors improved just as well in terms of diagnostic capability as the self-confident doctors. Okay, so that's evidence that your imposter syndrome doesn't make you do your job any worse.
Right.
It just hurts more as you're going through it. But most importantly, they found that the doctors actually did better when they were in this imposter group, when they have self-doubt. And they did better in a very important way. They became more other-focused. The patients ranked them as having better bedside manner. And the logic behind that is you're worried about not fitting in, you're worried that you're not good enough, so you over-rotate on the needs of others. That is an incredibly good stance to come from. How can I serve my team in this situation? Why are we trying to get rid of that? So the thought was there has to be some better way.
Right.
You feel like you don't belong. Imposter syndrome can make you actually belong more. How can we start helping the imposter syndrome, using it to our advantage rather than trying to turn the whole thing off? Which we can talk about if you want, depends how deep you want to go.
Well, what's interesting is I think that from that research is as you help others, it would clearly override the imposter syndrome part. So it's almost like, I wouldn't say it's effortless, but as soon as you shift into that gear of giving, the imposter syndrome feels less, it doesn't hold as much power for you on you in that moment, I would imagine. I mean, yeah, it'll rear its head every once in a while, but if you keep that in mind, absolutely. It's again, you talk about this idea of unlocking in this part. What are some of the other elements of unlocking that you wanted to shine a spotlight on? Because I think once you get to the third, you can't get to the third phase until you get through the second phase.
Yeah. Oh, you mean outside of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, outside of it.
Okay, so the second section and the one that you're putting your finger on now is the one where I felt the most imposter syndrome. It's like,
yeah,
it's funny that you kind of called this out, and it's fitting that the chapter's in there on it. I've been getting the best feedback about this middle bit because it's all about specific tactics to help you enjoy the job you already have, which not a lot of people are talking about. And I was scared out of my mind about it. I was like, who am I to talk about these things? And like, it's so fluffy. People are going to think it's baloney, like on and on and on and on and on. It's been so nice to see that section is picking up some great drive. And in here, it's all about like the way that we're kind of approaching our careers being a little bit upside down, meaning we have this assumption that if we change jobs, it's going to get better. But if you don't change the way that you work, you just go and get a new job, and there's like a honeymoon phase. It feels great for 2 or 3 months, and then everything comes rushing back, and you have the same problems in a new place.
Yeah, no matter where you go, there you are.
Exactly right. Very well put. Okay, and so this middle bit is all about how can you take a look at your job and the way you're doing it and change how, without changing what you have to do. The number one pushback I get from people is, I don't have time to enjoy it. I just have to get this TPS report done. I just have to like do this thing, that thing, whatever. I'm too busy for it. And what I'm saying to people, and I genuinely stand behind it, this is what I want people to take from the book, is don't change your to-do list. Change the way you accomplish the to-do list. And when you do that, you will enjoy the to-do list more. You're still going to get it done. You just got to change the way you think about it. And the example of that is, if you open up Google Maps today and you say, I want to go to a restaurant or wherever it is, it's 25 minutes away. I'm going from point A to point B. Google will ask you, do you want to walk? Do you want to take a bike? Are we driving? Public transit? If you're driving, do you want to take tolls? Do you want to take the most economical route, the most scenic route? There are options. All of these options take us from point A to point B. In the workforce, the options we tend to have are usually 0 down to like 1, best practices. And the question is like, best for whom? Right? What's best for me is not best for you.
Right.
So the classic classic example I'll use is imagine that you're asked by your boss to give a project update to the team at the end of the week. Okay, let's say it's you and I, we're two hypothetically different people. And you really like presentations and I really like data analysis. Okay.
Mhm.
Your version of that is you're going to think about what's going on, talk to the team, figure it out. You're going to build a beautiful PowerPoint presentation. You're going to tell a lovely story standing up at the team on Friday, and it's going to be a great update meeting. My version of that is I'm going to get an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to look at the metrics. I'm going to pull out all the different metrics. I'm going to write up a report. I'm going to send it to everybody and ask them to come to the meeting with any questions that they have. We have the meeting. We go through the questions. Both of those versions, mine and yours, accomplish the exact same task.
Yep.
But if I try to do it your way or you try to do it my way, we will not enjoy it and probably do a worse job at it.
The
challenge is,
sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just to finish the thought there, like the challenge is it's unconventional to take a little bit of time to think about what ways of working do we enjoy, like not at an existential level, at a highly tactical level. And so there are actual techniques in the book where I showed like, here are some tactics to help you figure out specifically how you like to do certain tasks so that you can take your to-do list and just change the way that you're trying to accomplish them. Light bulb goes off. You'll believe me the first time you do it. Like got the exact same thing done. I used to hate this thing. And now it's like the highlight of my week.
Okay. So it's fascinating because I talk about, in terms of productiveness and personal productiveness is that we work subjectively to get to objectives. We always do that. There's because we're all different, right? So this is where I'll ask for insights on when you're dealing with an organization where they are very set in their ways. How do you kind of still bring that to the table? So for example, this is the way we always do presentations, and this is the way. How do you kind of work around that? Is it more of a, yeah, I'd just love to hear how that can unfold, because I know some people like, I'd love to do it the way I would love to do it, but that's not the way we do it here in this organization. What are some of the things people can do when they feel that way? Because yeah, like if they could do it the way they wanted to and still realize and the same outcome, then why wouldn't you let them do it that way?
Yeah. So caveat, you could have a not very good manager and they would not let you do anything in any way that you want. And they're incredibly going to micromanage you and blah, 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 blah. Those humans exist.
Mm-hmm.
My argument is they're not as ubiquitous as we might think that they are.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is we don't always take things in the right way to our managers to help them help us. Right. So you asked a great question. It's one of the chapters in the book as well at the end of the book. But one of the best ways you can do this is rather than making your manager figure this out, there's an exercise in the book that will help you map out. This is what I really like. Okay. There's 4 or 5 ways I really like to work. And if we were going back to your example, I really love giving presentations. I really like talking to people. I really like talking in front of the team. I really like coming up with visuals. Those are the things you love. And so every time you're given a task, right, I have to give a project update. You think, how can I map the greatest number of these things I enjoy doing in order to accomplish this thing over here? Now, once you have that, you can take it to your manager or your team or whomever it might be. And I'll give you a very specific question you could ask. What would need to be true for me to do it this way? And the wording of this question is very intentional. I don't want to talk about all the reasons why my way won't work at this moment. I want to know from you, my boss or team, what would need to be true in order for me to try it this way? Well, I need to know that your presentation is going to include this, this, and this. I need to know that this person signs off on it. And I need us to have a meeting afterwards to discuss whether that really did or didn't work.
Right.
Phenomenal.
Right. Well, what you've done is you've eliminated 2 interrogative, like the how and the why. You automatically put it on them. Like, why can't I do it this way? It's too ambiguous and it's already going to be infused with their bias or the company bias. How? Well, we already have the how. So why are you trying to change the how? But the what creates that, there's more definitive elements around. I love the way it kind of reminds me of the questions from, I think it's Byron Katie, like, is this true? Is this true? Like it's those,
right.
It's a version of that question, but kind of reflected outward towards somebody else.
But you need the specificity, just like you said. And this is where we get caught in our own catch-22 of like, you know what? The way the company does it is X. I know I don't enjoy that. An unhelpful thing to say to your manager for your manager is, I don't really like doing it that way. Can I do it a different way? That is like maximum ambiguity for them. right? Your manager is going to take a risk on one of their people doing something new, which is always a little bit scary. They have no idea how it is you're going to get it done, and they don't know whether it's going to accomplish the outcome. Maximum ambiguity and risk for them. But if you take time, like we talked about, to know these are some of the things the ways I enjoy working, and you have the how defined, not perfectly, right? But enough of it defined that you can go to them and then say, what would need to be true for me to do it like this? Most times, even a mediocre manager will say, I'll let you take a shot. They might not love it right up front, but they'll usually let you take a shot. And even if they don't, by asking that question, you're turning the light bulb on for them that this is something you're thinking about. So maybe it won't be this time because, hey, Mike, I know you want to give a big giant presentation. The people in the room for this one are very senior and they're very analytical, and we just need a report this time. Fine. The next time you bring it up that way, higher probability you're going to get what you want, and so on and so forth, kind of down the line. So you're priming the pump, even if you don't get an opportunity this one time.
So it sounds like what we're doing here is we're going into part 3. The exercise and what we're talking about now is the third part, because you've kind of, and again, we can't go over all the elements of part 1, which is unblock, part 2, which is unlock, but part 3, we've touched on that a little bit here. What are some of the other elements of part 3? Maybe the one that people might do before they do parts 1 and 2. Because when I'm looking at it, there's elements where I'm like, if you do this, there is a propensity to do one of these too early, you won't get the outcome you're looking for. So can you think of one of those that you're like, hey, be cautious. This is part of part 3. This is the unleashing, but you need to do it after you do the other 2. Otherwise you may not get what you're looking for.
Nobody's asked me this question. This is a really excellent question. So I tried to write the book in a logical order, while at the same time balancing, if you just pick it up and open it up and read one of the chapters, you could try one of the tactics. So I'd like to think that there isn't a version of like, you cannot do it.
Right.
I think it will be made better by putting it near the end. And so if I was to think in that regard, there's a chapter in the 3rd section about how to make better decisions. This one, shockingly to me, decision-making for me, I'm a huge decision-making nerd. Let's put it that way, lightly. This is a polite way to put it. The shocking thing to me is, when did you learn about decision-making? Really get taught what great decision-making is.
Oh gosh, I can't remember. I really can't. Maybe in high school when you're dealing with like science and stuff like that, or no, you know what? When you're choosing classes, that's it. To me. So when you go to, we just dealt with that with my son. Like, which classes do we choose based on interest? And of course, grade 9, there's a limited amount, but as you move outward, by the time you get to grade 12, the field's wide open. So I would say probably grade 9, theoretically.
Okay, great answer. And what that is, that's an example of a time when you're having to make a challenging decision. But we're not taught how to make that challenging decision. And even worse, how would you measure the quality of the decision that you made? Right?
Especially
whether or not your son,
especially in that, because you have no data to you've never been given the chance to have that choice before, and now you're asked to make it.
That's right. And you try to make the decision, and if you're like most people, the thing you'll do is you'll say, did I like this course? Did I get an A in this course? That's judging the decision based on the outcome. Poker players call that resulting. It is a terrible way to judge the quality of your decision. I'll give you a very comical example of this. Go stand at the edge of a cliff, take a quarter, heads you jump, tails you don't. Okay. Yeah. Hopefully tails comes up, but you would never call that a quality decision. And there's not a lot done, particularly in the workforce, to say, hey, Mike, let's talk about decision-making, like as a fundamental skill that we need to be great at. We don't do that very, very well. And so the chapter on decision-making is all about like, let me break down for you some classic terrible decisions in business that maybe didn't look like they were terrible decisions, that will help you see why the most common way that you're making decisions and the most common way people do it is pros and cons. And that is one of the worst ways to make a decision. A list of pros and a list of cons. Terrible way to make decisions, but it's the most common because nobody teaches us anything better. And why I think the decision-making chapter needs to come after some of the stuff that we've learned is there's a lot of stuff earlier in the book about how to break down your thinking and how to take that thinking to other people in a way that's going to result in you getting back the highest value bang for your buck.
It's clarity.
And
It's
that's
clarity.
right. And
yeah.
that's right. And so that some of those things will make your decision making better. Though you could pick up the chapter and you can, skip right to the end and read the tactic to help you make better decisions, and it will help. It will be made better if you've jumped through a couple of the hoops on the way there.
Interestingly, when I think about, I just did a presentation where you talk, I mean, again, and I teach people with my work how to decide what to theme your days. And, most people don't realize that they've done this before. And I'm like, well, if do you watch college football? Yeah. Well, what day is college football on? No, it's typically Saturdays. Okay. So you've decided that you watch that. So what if you were to throw other things in there? But we tend to make decisions very binary. We love binary decisions. We love absolutes, right? Because it removes ambiguity and uncertainty. And I think, again, relating back to what we we're just talking about, part 1 and part 2 kind of remove, like it does its best to get rid of as much ambiguity as possible. I mean, we can't escape uncertainty because number 1, we might be dealing with other people, but number 2, the world, we can't just stop the world, right? And so when I think about, what do you think about when it comes to the idea of decision making? And I mean, even like, this is where feedback, I think, comes in, which is, another chapter in Unleash, is how do you make sure that you're not being too binary with these things, trying to be, again, applying nuance to the unleashing, right? Because once you've cleared it up, I think you can get better at that. It's just, how do you make sure that you are, having nuance as part of this process more intentionally than just incidentally?
Mm-hmm. Another great one. So this one I would probably take from the angle of great book, Descartes' Error by Antonio Damasio. If you haven't read it, it's a bit dense. Again, I'm a bit of an armchair neuroscience guy, so I love this stuff, but it can be sometimes hard to get through. And he showed something incredible in him and his group. And that's that a lot of times we think decision making is purely rational. I want to remove all emotions. To your point, I'm going to have a bit that I flip. It's 1 or it's 0. I'm going to run the numbers and that's going to tell me what to go and do. And actually, it turns out you physically cannot make a decision without your emotions. Right? There's a case of a very famous case in neuroscience and psychology. This guy got a spike through his brain and it ripped out the parts of his brain that basically handle emotions. Purely rational human being. Outcome? 0 decision making. Should I stand up or sit down from the couch that I'm in? I have to do some work. How should I organize my papers before I start? Completely frozen and stuck. Right? You need your emotions in order to make decisions. And so the argument that I make in the book is you want to have what I call a thought routine. Right? And a thought routine is about having a mental process that you step through. Step 1, step 2, step 3, to force yourself through the various steps to make sure that you consider the things that you need to consider. And one of those steps at the end is your gut. Right?
Yeah.
We're not just going to look at the numbers. I'm going to ask you what feels right to you. Don't give me any justification about it. Right? There's a great test for that as well. They go back to the coin flip. It comes from Rick Rubin. It's in his book, which is amazing. I really
love
like
that
it.
book. Yeah.
That's a good book.
The creative active way of being. And I mean, I could listen to him talk. Have you seen some of his like the Shangri-La documentary and all that stuff? Oh my goodness. And he was in there was another documentary he was in too that I didn't. Well, Seth Godin was in that documentary too, which was phenomenal. Like, I did not expect to see Seth Godin in a series with. I'm like, oh, but then when I saw him, I'm like, oh, this makes total sense.
Of course, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. So on top of everything, being an incredible music producer and yada yada yada, he's got this thing for decision making, which I never thought I'd find with a guy like that. But if you're having trouble figuring out what your gut is, he has a beautiful solve. Again, coin flip. Hopefully not at the edge of a cliff. Right? If you have 2 options. Okay, you're going to assign heads to one and tails to the other. At this moment, it feels like everything you've ever done before with a coin toss. Okay? You're going to flip the coin. And while it's in the air, think about whether you want heads or tails. And when it comes down, don't even look. That's your answer. That's your gut. Now, you may not choose to go that way, but that tells you what your gut is. And we've all kind of experienced that. You flipped the coin, you wanted tails, heads came up, and you're like, dang. That's your gut speaking to you. And it's not to say that you should always go only with what your gut tells you to do. It's to say what your gut is telling you is one of many important factors to consider. And so make sure that it's part of your decision-making process. And, tactics like Rick Rubin's coin toss thing, super helpful to get you clear, on what your gut is so that you can consider your gut feeling among all the other factors that are important to the decision.
Jason, this has been a great conversation. And we could talk a lot more about this stuff, but I want to be respectful of your time and the listeners' time. The book is called Your Grass is Greener. Use what you have, get what you want at work and in life. Where I know there's a playbook in here too, so we can touch on that as you wrap up, but where can people pick up the book? Talk a little bit about the playbook that's in here and where they can keep up with your work.
Cool. 3 questions in a row. We'll see if I can get this more right than jumbling your name at the start of the conversation. So the whole book ends with a playbook. So when you buy the book, at the back of the book, you'll find the playbook. If you also buy the book, you can go to my website or the book's website, yourgrassisgreener.com, and you can get the playbook as a standalone thing. And I wanted it to feel like a playbook, kind of like what you described college football. Like you're in this situation, flip to that page of the playbook and do the thing it says to do and see what happens, basically. So you can find the book at yourgrassisgreener.com. The book is also anywhere you would find books. Very grateful for that. I have a great publisher. Amazon's probably the most common place. You can find it there. If you want to keep up with what I'm up to, best place is either LinkedIn. I have a blog going at, you can find it thejasonsilver.com. Relatively easy to spell all that stuff, but I'm sure we'll put it down in.
It'll be in the show notes. Yes, absolutely.
Would love to hear from folks. Love them to pick up the book. Love to hear feedback about what they think about it. I never set out really to be an author. I'm just so fired up to have the book out there and the opportunity to help people.
Jason, this has been great. Thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you.
Thanks to Jason for joining me on the program today. You can find everything that we discussed in the podcast app you're using right now to check out this podcast, or go to mikevardy.com/podcast559. And again, subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts is one way to support the show. Just subscribe and then leave a rating or review or a comment in Spotify. You could do that as well. Another way to support the show is to check out the sponsors that you heard during our conversation today. Go to mikevardy.com/podcast sponsors. Click on any of the sponsors that resonate with you, and that way they know that we sent you, and you get a little bit of a deal in the process. That's it for this episode. Tune in for the next episode where we dive into a Flashback Friday episode. I hope you got a kick out of our conversation today. I know I did, and I hope you learned a lot too. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.